At the edge of the world, where every map fades into a blank stretch of white, there lies a continent that almost feels like it doesn't belong to our world. Antarctica, a landmass larger than Europe, buried beneath miles of ice, untouched, unclaimed, and shrouded in a silence that feels almost deliberate. Here, the horizon dissolves into nothingness, and the air itself carries the kind of stillness that makes you aware of your own heartbeat. It is not merely cold, it is absolute. The kind of cold that swallows sound, time and memory alike. What makes this place extraordinary is not just its beauty or isolation, but the strange sense that it resists us, as if it was never meant to be seen, never meant to be reached. No native people have ever called it home. No empire has dared to conquer it. Even in an age when humanity has divided, claimed, and measured every corner of the earth, Antarctica stands outside the game, a white void, immune to ambition. When explorers first drew their maps centuries ago, they left the far south blank, not because they had no imagination, but perhaps because they sensed that what lay beyond was not ready to be known. Even now, in the age of satellites and science, this land keeps its secrets. The information that reaches us, the photographs, the data, the discoveries, all seem carefully chosen, as if the truth of Antarctica is being filtered through a veil we are not yet meant to lift. It is strange to think that in a world ruled by conquest and curiosity, humanity could agree to leave one place untouched. Yet here, even rival nations share a silence. They call it peace. But peace has never been humanity's natural state. Perhaps it is something else. Perhaps it is a truce, drawn over something we are not ready to understand. As the winds move endlessly across the ice, you can almost feel that this continent remembers. It remembers a time before history, before our species, before the first map was ever drawn. It feels less like a part of the earth and more like a reflection of it. A frozen mirror showing what happens when time itself stands still. And so, we begin here, at the edge of everything. A place that defies ownership, that rejects noise, that endures untouched beneath the oldest cold on earth. Because somewhere under that white silence lies the beginning of every human question, the need to imagine, to explain, and to believe that even at the world's end, there must be something waiting to be found. Long before the first ship ever touched the frozen seas, long before a compass pointed toward the pole, the idea of Antarctica existed, not in sight, but in imagination. To the ancient world, it was not yet a continent of ice, but a concept, a necessary piece of the Earth's design. They called it Terra Australis Incognita, the unknown southern land. In an age when maps were drawn as mirrors of belief, balance was everything. The Earth, they thought, could not be whole if it leaned too heavily to one side. If lands and civilizations thrived in the north, then surely there must be another great land to the south, equal in weight, vast and mysterious, to keep the planet in harmony. It was less geography than philosophy, a vision of cosmic symmetry. Among the first to give this dream shape were the Greeks. Pythagoras, long before he became the language of mathematics, imagined Earth as a perfect sphere suspended in space, balanced by unseen forces. To him, this unseen southern world was not fantasy, but necessity. Later, Aristotle and his successors carried the idea forward, claiming that somewhere beneath the known continents lay another realm, temperate, fertile, and untouched. In their maps, the world curved downward into mystery, and in that space, imagination found a home. Centuries later, the Romans inherited this dream. Scholars such as Claudius Ptolemy drew grand maps of the earth, vast and confident. Yet they too left the southern edge open, not empty, but filled with a graceful arc of possibility. To the Romans, Terra Australis wasn't a myth to be proven. It was a truth waiting for discovery. They believed that nature, in its perfection, would never leave the planet incomplete. But it wasn't only the West that dreamed of the lands below. In the Far East, ancient Chinese texts spoke of Nanzhou, the southern continent, a distant land beneath the sun where Strange winds blew, and soil was said to shimmer with color. To them, it was both a realm of mystery and a metaphor, a spiritual reflection of the human world, a place where balance was restored when the northern lands grew chaotic. Even in Polynesian myth, fragments of the same idea appear, of southern horizons, cold seas, and lands hidden behind mists. Across civilizations that never met, the same belief endured. The world must be balanced, and therefore something must exist at the edge of the unknown. Terra Australis Incognita became more than an empty space on a map. It became the embodiment of the human instinct to complete the unfinished picture, to fill the silence with wonder. And so, through centuries, this unseen world lived in imagination. Artists painted it as lush and green, populated with strange creatures. Mapmakers shaded it boldly, stretching across the bottom of their parchment as if the earth itself was anchored to it. In these ancient maps, the known world sat delicately upon the shoulders of the unknown. For the Greeks and the Romans, for the Chinese and the dreamers of the South Seas, this hidden land symbolized something greater than geography. It was the proof that mystery was necessary, that even in a world explained by stars and mathematics, there must remain a place beyond reason. But imagination has a strange power. The more we believe in a place, the more it begins to call to us. And by the 15th century, that call grew too loud to ignore. Ships began to sail beyond the edge of every known chart. Compasses trembled, waves rose, and men driven by ambition and curiosity set their eyes toward the south. Because soon, the dream of Terra Australis, the imagined balance of the earth, would be tested not by ink or philosophy, but by wind, ice, and the endless sea. For centuries, Terra Australis existed only as an elegant idea, a dream painted on the edges of ancient maps. But dreams have a way of demanding proof, and so began one of humanity's greatest obsessions, to find the truth at the end of the world. The oceans of the 18th and 19th centuries were not yet conquered, only endured. Sailors spoke of waters so cold they could crack a ship in half, of winds that roared like living things, and of nights so long that even the stars seemed to vanish. Yet still, they sailed south, following nothing but courage, curiosity, and the faint promise of discovery. Among the first was Captain James Cook, who in 1773 crossed the Antarctic Circle for the very first time. He saw only endless ice, a world of floating walls, glittering and lifeless. In his journal, Cook wrote that, "No man will ever venture farther than I have done, and that the lands which may lie beyond will never be explored." He believed the mystery of Antarctica would remain eternal, but history, as always, had other plans. Decades later, when maps had become bolder and empires hungered for glory, new men rose to challenge that frozen silence. They were not conquerors of nations, but of limits. The names Amundsen, Scott, and Shackleton would become immortal, carved not in stone but in ice and suffering. Roald Amundsen, a Norwegian driven by precision and patience, was the first to reach the South Pole in 1911. His journey was an exercise in mastery, meticulous planning, calm execution, and quiet triumph. When he planted his flag on that lifeless plain, there was no roar of victory, no audience to witness it, only the wind, whispering across the white horizon. But glory is never shared equally. Robert Falcon Scott, the British explorer who followed soon after, reached the same pole only weeks later, to find Amundsen's flag already there, fluttering in the cold. His return journey was one of unimaginable endurance and slow tragedy. Frostbite, hunger, and exhaustion took his team one by one. In his final diary, Scott wrote, "We took risks. We knew we took them. Things have come out against us, and therefore we have no cause for complaint." Those words became his epitaph, a quiet salute to human will, and a reminder that some victories are paid for in silence. And then there was Ernest Shackleton, whose name became synonymous not with triumph, but with survival. In 1914, his ship Endurance was trapped and crushed by the sea ice, leaving his crew stranded for nearly 2 years. Yet Shackleton refused despair. Through impossible odds, frozen seas, collapsing ice, and endless cold, he led his men home alive. It was not discovery that made Shackleton legendary, but the endurance of the human spirit when everything else was lost. Together, these men transformed Antarctica from myth into map, and in doing so revealed how fragile the line between ambition and destruction truly is. They reached the farthest point on Earth, but what they found was not gold or glory. It was a silence deeper than anything they had imagined. Every expedition brought back stories of strange lights beneath the ice, compass readings that twisted unpredictably, and echoes that seemed to come from beneath the frozen ground. Yet for all their courage, none of them truly understood what they had awakened. The age of exploration gave the world knowledge, and yet it also deepened the mystery, because beneath every footprint left in that snow lies something far older than humanity itself. And as the last sails vanished beyond the horizon, Antarctica remained unchanged, vast, indifferent, and waiting. There is a secret buried beneath the white silence of Antarctica, one that defies everything we think we know about this frozen world. For under the thickest ice on Earth lies the memory of a time when this continent was alive. Long before glaciers claimed it, long before the poles turned to ice, Antarctica was green. Scientists digging through layers of rock and ice have uncovered what seems impossible. The remains of ancient forests, leaves pressed into stone, fragments of roots and pollen frozen in time. Beneath the crushing cold, they found the ghosts of trees that once reached for a warm sun. It's hard to imagine, standing amid endless snow, that this land was once a paradise of rivers and rain. Fossilized wood from conifer forests lies scattered across the transantarctic mountains. Each piece tells a story of a time when the air was rich with oxygen, when ferns unfurled in the wind, and insects hummed in the green shade. In some layers, scientists found the imprints of cycads and tree ferns, the same species that once grew in the jungles of Africa and South America. It was a world without ice, a world where life thrived at the bottom of the planet. And it wasn't just plants. The bones of dinosaurs, creatures that roamed freely through these forests, have been discovered along ancient riverbeds, their skeletons perfectly preserved by time. In a land now too cold to sustain even moss, these remains tell us of valleys where herds of long-necked sauropods once moved through swamps, where carnivores hunted beneath towering trees, and where night and day followed a strange rhythm of 6 months of sunlight and 6 months of dark. This revelation forces us to see Antarctica not as a wasteland, but as a time capsule, a continent that remembers a warmer Earth. Around 90 million years ago, during the Cretaceous period, global temperatures were far higher. There were no polar ice caps, and Antarctica sat under a greenhouse sky. The continent was still joined to others as part of a great supercontinent, Gondwana, a connected world of forests stretching from pole to pole. Rivers carved through what is now solid ice, carrying life to every corner of this southern land. But Earth is never still. The slow, unstoppable drift of tectonic plates pulled Antarctica southward, away from warmth and light. As it drifted, the planet itself began to cool. Mountains rose, currents shifted, and the first flakes of snow that fell here never melted. Layer by layer, century by century, Antarctica was entombed, not destroyed, but preserved. And even now, beneath miles of ice, there are signs that something still stirs. Scientists drilling deep into Lake Vostok, a body of water sealed off for millions of years, have discovered traces of microbial life. It seems even in eternal darkness, life finds a way to endure. So perhaps the question is not whether Antarctica once lived, but whether in some way it still does. Every fossil, every ancient root frozen in the ice, is a whisper from an Earth that once breathed differently. The planet remembers, even when we forget. As the ice thickened and the forests disappeared, the memory of that green world sank deeper, waiting for us to rediscover it. And beneath all the layers of history and frost, Antarctica keeps that memory close, proof that no world ever truly dies. It only sleeps, waiting for warmth to return. In 1513, on a sheet of gazelle skin in the court of the Ottoman Empire, a man named Piri Reis drew a map that should not exist. It was a masterpiece of its time. Delicate ink lines showing the coasts of South America, Africa, and the Atlantic in a way no European had ever seen before. But what lay at the bottom of that map would shake the boundaries of history itself. Because beneath the known world, Piri Reis drew a coastline, smooth, detailed, and eerily familiar, a land that matches the northern shores of Antarctica. Yet the map was made 3 centuries before any human had ever seen the continent, and nearly 500 years before modern technology would reveal what lay beneath its ice. Even more astonishing, the coastline on the Piri Reis map appears ice-free, not the frozen wasteland we know today, but a temperate shoreline, as it would have looked thousands of years ago, before the continent was buried under its miles-thick glaciers. For centuries, historians have struggled to explain how a 16th-century admiral could have drawn something no one had ever seen. In his own notes, Piri Reis claimed he compiled his map from 20 older charts and 8 maps of the ancients, some dating back to the time of Alexander the Great. Perhaps, he said, he was only copying a memory that was already ancient when he found it. When the map was rediscovered in 1929 in Istanbul's Topkapi Palace, it immediately became a riddle for modern science. Cartographers and geologists compared its southern coast to modern seismic surveys of Antarctica's bedrock, and to their astonishment, the shapes aligned almost perfectly with the land that exists beneath the ice. It was as if whoever drew those ancient sources had mapped a world before it froze. Some scientists argued that the resemblance was coincidental, that Piri Reis had simply misinterpreted the coast of South America and drawn it too far east. But others, geographers, naval officers, and even CIA analysts in the mid-20th century, saw something else, evidence of a knowledge we shouldn't have had. How could a 16th-century mapmaker, armed only with compasses and sailors' tales, draw a continent buried beneath ice for millennia? Could he have inherited fragments of a civilization so old that its memory lingered only in forgotten maps? Or is the truth simpler, that history is full of accidents that feel too perfect to be chance? Whatever the answer, the Piri Reis map remains one of the most unsettling artifacts of the age of exploration, a document that should belong to the future, not the past. It forces us to ask whether we truly know where our knowledge comes from, and what might have been lost along the way. If this map is accurate, then humanity has forgotten an entire chapter of its own story, a chapter written not in words, but in lines of ink across a skin that has survived 500 years of silence. Perhaps Piri Reis was not just recording the world as he knew it, but preserving a memory of the world as it once was, a green Antarctica, alive and unfrozen. And if such a memory could survive through centuries of darkness, passed from hand to hand, then what else might have endured, buried beneath ice, waiting for us to remember? Because sometimes, the oldest maps don't just show where we've been. They remind us how much we once knew, and how much we have forgotten. Long before the world took the shape we know, before borders, before oceans, before ice, Earth was whole. A single vast landmass stretched across the planet's southern half, wrapped in forests and rivers, home to life that had not yet learned its own fragility. This ancient world was called Gondwana, and Antarctica was its heart. 200 million years ago, there was no frozen desert at the bottom of the world. Instead, there was green, endless forests that linked what would one day become Africa, South America, India, Australia, and Antarctica into one vast breathing continent. Rivers wound through warm valleys, ferns towered like trees. Early reptiles walked beneath cycads that drank from a sun that never set too low. The air was thick with life, and time itself seemed to move slower. But nothing on Earth stays still forever. Deep beneath that living surface, the planet was already changing. The crust shifted, tectonic plates grinding slowly, almost imperceptibly, but with a force greater than any storm. Gondwana began to crack. Great rifts tore through its valleys. Volcanoes erupted where forests once grew. The land began to split apart, each piece drifting on molten seas of stone toward its lonely destiny. Africa and South America moved westward. India drifted north to collide with Asia and raise the Himalayas. Australia broke away, drifting into the Pacific. And Antarctica, once at the heart of the world, was left behind, drifting southward, alone, toward the pole. At first, the change was slow. The forests endured, clinging to the warming light. But as Antarctica crossed invisible boundaries of latitude, the temperature began to fall. Ice began to form on the mountaintops, spreading year by year. Rivers froze, winds sharpened, and the green world that once defined this land faded beneath a white silence that would never leave. When the final forests die, their roots were sealed beneath the snow, fossilized in time. Mountains that once echoed with the sounds of flowing water became mute, buried beneath glaciers miles thick. Antarctica, once the heart of life, became its memory, a monument to how even the mightiest continents can vanish into stillness. Today, when scientists drill through its ice and bring up cores of ancient rock, they find traces of those lost connections. Fossilized wood from the same trees that once grew in India and Africa. Identical species of ferns that lived on both sides of what would become two oceans. Each discovery is a reminder that the Earth was once united, that the boundaries we draw today are illusions of time. Even the minerals hidden deep beneath the Antarctic ice, coal, iron, and oil, are whispers from that green world. Proof that this place once pulsed with warmth, with sunlight, with life. The same resources that power our modern world were born in that lost age of unity. And yet, beneath all the science and evidence, there is something poetic in Gondwana's story. A reminder that everything that separates us once belonged together. That every continent, every nation, every fragment of Earth carries within it the memory of a shared beginning. Antarctica's isolation is not its curse, but its role, to remind us that even when the world tears itself apart, the memory of connection remains. Beneath its silence lies proof that unity is not destroyed by distance. It is merely hidden, waiting for those who know where to look. Because the ice, for all its stillness, remembers. It remembers when the Earth was one, and when we too were part of something greater than ourselves. Beneath the thickest ice on Earth, under layers that have not seen sunlight for millions of years, there is movement. Hidden rivers carve secret paths through black tunnels of pressure and stone. Vast lakes, sealed beneath glaciers older than civilization itself, pulse softly in the darkness. To the surface world, Antarctica seems lifeless. But below, it breathes. For decades, scientists believed that beneath so much ice, life could not exist. The conditions seemed too extreme. Temperatures colder than Mars, crushing pressure, no light, no warmth. But curiosity has a way of defying certainty. And when human instruments finally reached the hidden world below, they discovered something extraordinary. A living ecosystem, trapped in eternal night. One of the greatest discoveries came from Lake Vostok, buried beneath more than 2 miles of solid ice. A lake larger than the entire surface of Lebanon, untouched by air for over 15 million years. When researchers finally drilled through and sampled the water, they found microscopic life, bacteria, extremophiles, and unknown microbes that had adapted perfectly to this hidden world. Some scientists believe these organisms are not only ancient, but entirely unique, life forms that evolved in total isolation, surviving without sunlight, drawing energy from the minerals of the Earth itself. The idea is almost unfathomable, a secret biosphere beneath the frozen crust of the planet. In this world, there is no day or night, no sky, no sound. The water is kept liquid not by heat from above, but by the Earth's own quiet warmth, geothermal energy seeping from deep within. It is a realm where evolution has moved to its own rhythm, free from extinction, untouched by time. And Lake Vostok is only the beginning. Across the continent, scientists have mapped more than 400 subglacial lakes connected by a labyrinth of undergi, round rivers. These hidden waterways may be the veins of Antarctica, carrying not just water but memory. Each one holds the story of a world before the ice, sealed away and preserved like a heartbeat, trapped in stone. When the first images of these hidden rivers emerged from radar scans, even the most skeptical minds felt awe. It was as if the continent itself refused to be dead, as if, beneath all that silence, something was still moving, still alive, still waiting. Some researchers have even suggested that these dark ecosystems may hold clues to life beyond Earth, to the icy moons of Jupiter and Saturn, where oceans lie beneath frozen crusts. If life can exist here, under Antarctica's crushing ice, then it could exist anywhere. In a sense, Antarctica is not only our coldest frontier, but also a mirror of other worlds, an alien landscape right here on Earth. Yet, for all the science, there is still something deeply spiritual about what lies beneath. The idea that life endures, quietly, patiently, invisibly, where all logic says it should not. It forces us to see existence itself as more resilient than we ever imagined. When you stand on the surface of Antarctica, all you see is stillness, a world without color, without sound. But below your feet, rivers flow through black tunnels, unseen and unstoppable. They do not rush or roar. They simply continue, the quiet persistence of life in its purest form. And maybe that is Antarctica's greatest secret, that even in absolute silence life endures, that beneath miles of frozen time, the Earth still whispers to itself, reminding us that even in the coldest, darkest places, something always survives. There are theories that dare to step beyond the edges of accepted history, ideas that ask whether what we call myth might simply be memory, written in symbols instead of words. Among them stands one of the most audacious of all, the theory that Antarctica itself may be Atlantis, the lost civilization buried not beneath the ocean, but beneath the ice. This vision was brought to life by Charles Hapgood, a quiet yet radical thinker who in the 1950s challenged the scientific world with an extraordinary proposal. He suggested that the Earth's crust, the outer shell upon which all continents rest, does not move slowly over eons as conventional plate tectonics suggests, but can shift suddenly, dramatically, and catastrophically. Hapgood called it Earth crust displacement, a theory that the entire outer layer of the planet might one day slip over its molten core like loose skin over a fruit. If such a thing happened, he argued, entire continents could change their positions in a geological instant. Warm, fertile lands could be thrust into the polar night, while frozen deserts could awaken into spring. And if this had ever occurred in the past, then what we now call Antarctica might once have existed thousands of miles farther north, green, habitable, and home to a civilization long forgotten. To Hapgood, the mystery of the Peary race map, showing an ice-free Antarctica, was not coincidence, but evidence. He believed it depicted the continent as it once was, before a sudden shift of the Earth's crust dragged it south to the pole, entombing it in ice. In his view, this could have been the cataclysm that destroyed Atlantis, not a sinking island swallowed by the sea, but a thriving world flash-frozen in a single cosmic upheaval. The idea captured imaginations around the world. Even Albert Einstein, though cautious, found Hapgood's work intriguing. He wrote in his foreword to Hapgood's book that the concept of crustal displacement was not impossible, acknowledging that our planet's balance is far more delicate than we like to believe. If Hapgood was right, it would mean that the story told by Plato of a civilization advanced in knowledge, wiped out by divine catastrophe, might not be fiction at all. It could be history told through allegory, the echo of a real event so ancient that its truth was lost to myth. Skeptics argue that geology does not support such rapid movement, that the ice cores and continental drift tell a slower, steadier story. Yet even the critics admit that Earth's past is filled with violent transitions, magnetic reversals, sudden climate shifts, and extinctions that defy simple explanations. The planet has rewritten itself before, and it will again. And so the question lingers. Could there once have been cities buried where now only glaciers stand? Could temples, knowledge, and culture, entire chapters of our human story, lie beneath miles of frozen silence, waiting for the ice to release them? To imagine that beneath the frozen wasteland of Antarctica lies not emptiness, but memory, not myth but evidence, is both thrilling and unsettling. If true, it would mean that civilization is not a straight line rising from ignorance to knowledge, but a circle, turning endlessly, rediscovering what was once known. Charles Hapgood's theory may remain unproven, but its beauty lies not in certainty, but in its challenge, the invitation to see myth as more than imagination, to look at our planet not as static, but alive, shifting, capable of erasing even itself. Because if the Earth truly once moved enough to bury entire worlds beneath the snow, then perhaps Atlantis never sank at all. Perhaps it simply froze. Long before compasses pointed south and explorers carved their way through frozen seas, humanity already spoke of a world beneath the world, a land beyond the horizon, hidden by storms and guarded by silence. From the Andes to the Aegean, from the islands of the Pacific to the deserts of Egypt, stories of a southern realm whisper through time like fragments of a forgotten song. Different tongues, distant worlds, yet somehow the same memory. Among the Incas of South America, ancient legends tell of a place called Paititi, a secret land of gold and knowledge, hidden deep in the mountains or far beyond them, where the sun god Inti sent his children to preserve the light of creation. Some accounts speak of travelers who sailed southward, following the light of the sun as it sank toward the edge of the earth, to a cold land that shone like silver. To the Inca priests, this distant region was sacred, a gateway to the gods, where the world began and where it would one day return. Across the vast Pacific, the Polynesians carried their own echoes of the same mystery. Their stories tell of Hawaii, the ancestral homeland from which their people set sail across the ocean. In many island traditions, Hawaii was not just behind them in space, but beneath them in the cosmic order, a southern realm, the underworld of creation and rebirth. The Maori spoke of Te Po, the great darkness from which life emerged. The Samoans spoke of a land beyond the winds, a place both real and divine. Some ancient navigators, guided only by stars and instinct, even described glowing lights on the horizon, reflections of auroras they could not understand, believing them to be the spirits of ancestors calling from the south. Far across the seas, the Greeks told their own version of this southern world, a realm they called Antichthones, the counter-earth. To Pythagoras and later philosophers, the world was balanced by this hidden land beneath the known one, home to people unseen, perhaps even more enlightened than themselves. It was a mirror world, equal and opposite, where the cycle of life continued unseen. Plato's dialogues, too, carried the undertones of this symmetry. The idea that what was lost beneath the waves or hidden beyond the stars might one day return to the world of men. Even in the ancient Egyptian texts, some priests wrote of Taneta, the land of the gods, lying far to the south, a sacred territory where the divine had once walked among mortals. To them, the south was the direction of birth and death, of beginnings and endings, where the sun found renewal before rising again. Across all these cultures, one truth seems to hum beneath the differences, that humanity has always sensed something powerful, something unreachable, waiting in the cold distance, a memory that refuses to die. Perhaps these myths are not coincidences, but reflections, like sunlight glinting off distant ice, scattered across the ages. Maybe the same event, the same ancient awareness, echoes through every civilization's collective memory, translated into gods and legends. The Incas remembered it as a land of gold, the Polynesians as a birthplace of souls, the Greeks as the counter-earth, the Egyptians as the home of the divine. Different names, same direction, always south. And maybe that is the true thread connecting them, not geography, but remembrance. Because even when the world forgets, memory has a way of surviving, disguised as story. So when we listen closely to the myths of our ancestors, of shining lands, buried worlds, and realms beneath the sun, we might be hearing more than imagination. We might be hearing Earth itself, speaking through the voices of those who came before, reminding us that legend and history are sometimes the same thing, just old in different languages. From far above the frozen wasteland of Antarctica, satellites see what the human eye cannot, the faint geometry of the impossible. Among the endless stretches of white and shadow, they reveal shapes too precise, too deliberate, to belong entirely to nature. Sharp peaks rising from the ice in near-perfect symmetry, triangular silhouettes aligned in patterns that whisper of design. They are called the Antarctic Pyramids, and they lie buried beneath layers of mystery and speculation. Some say they are nothing more than mountains, sculpted by the brutal hand of wind and ice. Others, looking at the images, sense something deeper, the unmistakable echo of architecture, geometry, and intention. The first of these anomalies came to attention through satellite imagery in the early 2000s. What seemed like simple ridges in the Ellsworth Mountains caught the eye of researchers who noticed how unnaturally even their slopes appeared. 3 sides, each rising at nearly the same angle. From above, the formations looked eerily like the Great Pyramids of Egypt, only these stood alone, silent, frozen, and untouched for millions of years. Skeptics were quick to explain. They spoke of nunataks, rocky peaks that pierce through glaciers, their shapes sharpened by erosion and the slow violence of time. The symmetry, they said, was illusion. The human mind, hungry for pattern and meaning, turns chaos into design. And yet, even as the scientific explanations multiplied, so too did the fascination. Because illusion or not, the images felt deliberate. They looked like something meant to be found. Some researchers pointed out that the pyramidal forms seemed arranged in triangular patterns, echoing the celestial alignments seen in ancient structures across the world, from Giza to Teotihuacan. Could it be coincidence? Perhaps. Or perhaps, as some fringe theorists believe, these icy monuments are remnants of a civilization predating all known history, a civilization erased by catastrophe, its architecture now entombed beneath the Antarctic ice. It is a tempting thought that beneath those peaks, frozen beneath miles of snow, could lie the ruins of something extraordinary. Temples, cities, evidence that humanity's story began long before we are willing to admit. But to those who have stood near these peaks, their enormity speaks of something else. Not human, not divine, but geological. The slow artistry of the planet itself. Nature, after all, is the greatest architect. Given time, wind and ice can sculpt perfection. Given patience, randomness becomes order. The mountains of Antarctica, with their sharp angles and clean lines, may be nothing more than coincidence, but coincidence can be powerful, especially when viewed through the lens of wonder. Still, one question lingers. Why do these formations exist in clusters, arranged in ways that mirror both human design and cosmic order? Why do their shadows fall with such precision across the landscape, as if following an ancient rhythm written into the planet's bones? No one truly knows, and perhaps that is the beauty of it. For every scientist who measures and dismisses, there is a dreamer who looks again, convinced that the ice is hiding something sacred. Between fact and faith lies a space where mystery lives, a space where questions echo louder than answers. As the satellites continue their silent orbit, they record the same images, those familiar triangles carved into the face of eternity. And though logic insists they are only mountains, the imagination refuses to let go. Because sometimes the greatest mysteries are not in what we find, but in what we almost believe. And in the shadows of Antarctica's white silence, belief has all the room it needs to grow. By the end of the Second World War, the world was weary of conquest. Empires had fallen, nations were divided, and the age of exploration seemed long gone. But in 1946, something stirred. A new kind of expedition, one cloaked not in the spirit of discovery, but in the quiet language of military command. Its name was Operation High Jump. Led by Rear Admiral Richard E. Byrd, the legendary polar explorer who had once flown across the Antarctic skies in the 1920s, this mission was unlike anything the frozen continent had ever seen. Officially, it was a U.S. Navy operation, a research expedition meant to test equipment and train personnel in cold conditions. But its scale told another story. Operation High Jump was enormous. 13 ships, 33 aircraft, and more than 4,700 men, making it the largest Antarctic expedition in history. It was a military armada sent to the most desolate place on Earth, as though preparing for a war at the bottom of the world. The operation began in late 1946, sailing from the United States into the endless expanse of the Southern Ocean. Byrd's fleet established bases, launched aircraft, and photographed vast stretches of untouched land, over 70,000 aerial images of Antarctica's icy wilderness. But behind the numbers, there was tension. Radio communications were limited, secrecy was absolute, and strange rumors began to ripple through the ranks. Some crew members spoke of equipment failures that couldn't be explained, compasses spinning wildly, aircraft instruments malfunctioning, strange atmospheric distortions that disoriented even the most experienced pilots. There were whispers of lights seen moving beneath the ice, and of flights that went off course, never to return. And then, suddenly, it ended. After only 8 weeks, Operation High Jump was halted. The mission, originally planned to last 6 months, was called back without it warning. Ships returned north. Planes were grounded. The official explanation cited severe weather and logistical challenges, but few believed that was the whole truth. When Admiral Byrd returned home, his public statements only deepened the mystery. In an interview with a Chilean newspaper in 1947, he warned that the United States must prepare to defend itself against enemies that can fly from pole to pole with incredible speed. It was a statement that ignited decades of speculation. What had Byrd seen in Antarctica that left such an impression on him? A discovery of nature, or something far beyond it? Conspiracy theories grew in the silence that followed. Some claimed Operation High Jump had been a covert military mission, a hunt for secret Nazi bases rumored to exist beneath the ice, remnants of the Third Reich's own polar expeditions. Others whispered of unidentified flying objects encountered during the mission, strange crafts darting through the sky, technology that defied logic. The US government dismissed the rumors, classifying much of the operation's documentation and declaring it a success. But for a mission that ended so abruptly, success seemed like a strange word. Byrd himself, led one more Antarctic expedition years later, yet he never spoke again about what truly happened during high jump. Whether the truth lies in human secrecy or natural danger, no one can say. What is clear is that after Operation High Jump, Antarctica was no longer just a frontier of science, it became a frontier of silence. The age of explorers ended with Byrd's fleet. What began as a journey of discovery became something else entirely, a reminder that the greatest mysteries are not always found in the unknown, but in the things we choose not to reveal. And so the mythic continent of ancient dreams passed quietly into the modern age, no longer the land of gods or forge, Ottoman civilizations, but the stage for a new kind of story, one not written in legend or philosophy, but in classified reports and unspoken truths. In the decade after the Second World War, the world stood divided, east against west, shadow against shadow. Nations armed themselves not only with weapons, but with ideologies. The Cold War had begun, and suspicion hung heavy over every ocean, every sky. Yet in 1959, something remarkable and strangely uncharacteristic happened. Amidst global distrust, the most powerful nations on Earth suddenly agreed on one thing: to leave an entire continent alone. It was called the Antarctic Treaty, signed in Washington, D.C. on December 1st, 1959. 12 nations took part: the United States, the Soviet Union, the United Kingdom, and others who, only years earlier, had stared each other down across battlefields. The treaty declared that Antarctica shall be used for peaceful purposes only: no military presence, no nuclear testing, no territorial claims, no mining, no drilling, no conquest. In an age defined by conflict and competition, this was extraordinary. On every other continent, power meant possession. Yet somehow, the world's greatest rivals agreed to surrender Antarctica, not to each other, but to silence. It was hailed as a triumph of cooperation, a symbol of peace in a divided age. But for some, it also raised a deeper, more unsettling question. Why? What truth could be so large, so universally respected, that it made enemies unite in secrecy? The official explanation was noble: that science, not politics, would rule the ice. The treaty created a model of shared research, open knowledge, and environmental protection. Scientists from different nations began working together, studying climate, geology, and biology in harmony. On the surface, it was a rare example of humanity choosing wisdom over greed. But beneath that surface, whispers continued. Why prohibit all military activity on a land so remote and resource-rich? Why ban not only weapons, but any form of industry? And why, even decades later, are satellite images of certain Antarctic regions blurred, censored, or restricted? Some claim the treaty was not about protection, but containment, an agreement not to exploit, but to conceal. The idea that perhaps something was discovered there in the years following Operation High Jump, something that required silence from every government involved. Even today, Antarctica remains the most tightly controlled region on Earth. No country owns it, no citizen can freely explore it, and no corporation can profit from it. Every visit is monitored. Every expedition requires approval. For a land supposedly empty and lifeless, it is remarkable how carefully it is guarded. Some researchers see this as proof that the treaty serves a deeper purpose. Perhaps not to prevent conflict, but to prevent revelation. Because true power often hides behind peace. When the world agrees too easily, one must always ask what lies beneath that harmony. There is, of course, the possibility that the treaty is exactly what it appears to be: humanity's collective promise to preserve something pure, untouched and beyond corruption. Maybe, in a world so fractured, Antarctica became our one sacred truce, a place where we chose restraint instead of conquest. And yet the timing, the secrecy, the scale of the agreement, they all leave behind an echo of suspicion. Because peace, when absolute, can begin to sound like silence. More than 60 years later, the treaty still stands. The ice remains forbidden. The nations that can scarcely agree on anything else still honor their word. It is, in its own way, the greatest mystery of all. Not a secret hidden beneath the ice, but a silence held above it. Perhaps Antarctica does not divide us because of what it contains, but because of what it reminds us of, that there are still places beyond ownership, beyond politics, beyond our reach. And in the heart of that unreachable world, the snow keeps falling, untouched, unbroken, and unexplained. They call it the most peaceful continent on Earth, a land open to all, owned by none. Yet for a place declared free and transparent under international law, Antarctica is curiously full of locked doors. Look closely at the maps, the flight paths, and the records of exploration, and a strange pattern begins to emerge. The world's most open continent may also be its most restricted. At first glance, it seems simple. Antarctica is vast, hostile, and deadly. Extreme weather, unpredictable storms, and magnetic anomalies make travel dangerous. But beyond the obvious dangers, there are zones where even the most experienced explorers are not allowed to go. Vast areas marked as no-fly corridors stretch across the ice, off-limits to all aircraft, both military and civilian. Officially, these bans exist for safety. The terrain, they say, is unstable, the winds unpredictable. But when pilots have accidentally veered into these forbidden regions, reports often end abruptly. Some describe instrument failures, sudden loss of communication, or strange electromagnetic interference. Others simply vanish, their coordinates erased, their names added to the long list of Antarctic mysteries. Then there are the blurred satellite images. Anyone can open a map app and zoom in on the frozen south, but certain regions, vast and carefully chosen, appear covered by digital smudges or pixelated fog. The public explanations vary. Data errors, low-resolution coverage, sensor issues. Yet these same satellites can capture the license plate of a car in the middle of a desert. So why, in the age of total surveillance, does a supposedly empty continent need censorship? Expeditions, too, face strange barriers. Over the decades, numerous scientific missions and private explorers have been denied access to certain coordinates. Requests vanish into silence or are politely redirected to safe, approved areas. Those who attempt to go without permission find their funding revoked or their permits revoked by the very nations who claim the land belongs to no one. It is as if the ice itself is protected by invisible laws no one fully understands. Whispers of forbidden zones circulate in the darker corners of research and rumor. Some claim they hide underground facilities built during the Cold War. Others believe ancient structures, perhaps the remnants of something far older, lie buried beneath the ice, guarded not to conceal human technology, but to protect a truth we are not ready to face. The deeper one looks, the more contradictory the picture becomes. A continent supposedly dedicated to peace and science, yet shrouded in restrictions, blurred images, and silence. A place declared for all mankind, yet controlled by the few who hold the keys to its access. Maybe the secrecy is innocent, an effort to protect fragile ecosystems, to prevent chaos in a place where mistakes mean death. Or maybe, as some believe, the restrictions are a veil, a way to keep the deeper layers of Antarctica's truth buried where they have always been, out of reach. But there's something haunting about the pattern itself. Every time humanity claims a place is empty, history eventually proves otherwise. Deserts once thought barren have revealed lost cities. Oceans once considered lifeless hide forests of coral and creatures we never imagined. And perhaps, beneath this frozen void, the same rule applies. Because the more tightly a mystery is guarded, the louder it calls. The more we are told that nothing exists there, the more the silence feels deliberate. Antarctica remains a blank space on the map. But maybe those blanks are not mistakes at all. Maybe they are the places where the truth still sleeps, wrapped in white, waiting for someone to look again. Beneath the silence of Antarctica, beneath its endless white plains and frozen mountains, lies a secret not of legend, but of power. For all the talk of peace, purity, and protection, the truth is that Antarctica is not empty. It is a vault, one that contains enough oil, gas, coal, and minerals to reshape the balance of the modern world. For millions of years, the continent has slept under its icy armor, preserving the remnants of an ancient, fertile past. But where there were once forests and swamps, there are now fossil fuels. Coal seams thicker than any on Earth, oil reserves estimated in the billions of barrels, and vast fields of natural gas locked away beneath the frozen crust. Geologists studying seismic data have also found signs of iron, copper, uranium, gold, and even rare earth minerals, the lifeblood of modern technology. If the ice were to melt, or if the treaty that guards it were ever broken, Antarctica could become the richest and most dangerous territory on Earth. The resources buried beneath its surface rival those of entire continents, and in a world driven by scarcity, that kind of wealth is never left alone for long. Yet for now, the Antarctic Treaty holds. It forbids any military or industrial exploitation of the continent, ensuring that no nation, not even the most powerful, can stake a claim to its hidden treasure. In 1991, the treaty was strengthened by the Madrid Protocol, declaring Antarctica a natural reserve devoted to peace and science. Drilling, mining, and extraction of any kind are banned indefinitely. On paper, it is a triumph, a moment where humanity chose restraint over greed. But the ice is thick, and so are the lies we tell ourselves. The nations that signed the treaty still send scientific expeditions, and those expeditions still drill. They call it research, geological sampling, climate analysis, core study. But in the fine print of these reports, there are always maps, measurements, and whispers of something more. Some believe the world's superpowers are quietly cataloguing Antarctica's resources, waiting for the right moment or the right crisis to reopen the debate. Because treaties are written by men, and men are bound by hunger. Oil shortages, mineral wars, climate collapse. Any one of these could turn the frozen continent from sanctuary to battlefield. And the signs are already there. Satellite surveys have revealed strange networks of roads and storage facilities near certain research bases. Nations once content to share data are now building permanent outposts. For science, they say, though each one flies a flag and guards its perimeter. Even as the surface remains untouched, beneath it, drilling probes and sensors continue to map the treasure below. It is as though the world is standing at the edge of temptation, staring into a vault it promised never to open. And every year, as technology advances and the climate warms, the lock grows weaker. Antarctica's resources could power civilizations, end energy crises, and feed economies for centuries. But they could also ignite a new kind of war, one fought not for land, but for survival. The same ice that now protects the continent may one day become the final line of defense between peace and chaos. The Antarctic Treaty was humanity's promise, a vow to keep one place untouched. But promises, like ice, do not last forever. The question is not whether the world will one day break that vow, but when. Because beneath the ice lies treasure enough to change everything. And silence thick enough to keep it secret, at least for now. At the edge of the world, where silence has weight and time stands still, lies a land that reflects us more than we realize. For all its distance, for all its cold and emptiness, Antarctica is not the world's end. It is its mirror, a place that shows us what we are and what we choose to forget. Every era has looked south and seen something different in the ice. To the ancients, it was balance, the other half of the earth holding creation in place. To the explorers, It was conquest, the last frontier to be mapped, endured, and claimed. To the scientists, it became a window into deep time, a frozen archive of every breath the planet has ever taken. And to those who whisper of secrets buried beneath the snow, it is the forbidden, a reminder that mystery still survives in an age that pretends to have explained everything. But perhaps Antarctica's truest power lies not in what it hides, but in what it reflects. Because the more we study it, the more we see our own reflection staring back, our hunger for knowledge, our need to dominate, our inability to leave anything untouched. Even a continent we promised to protect has become a stage for silent competition, for secret stations, for curiosity that cannot stay still. The ice preserves everything, the past, the air of ancient skies, the traces of vanished worlds. Yet beneath that purity, it also preserves our contradictions. We call Antarctica peaceful, yet it bristles with quiet rivalry. We call it empty, yet it holds more stories than any library. We call it dead, yet it is alive with memory, of forests and oceans, of creatures long gone, of civilizations we cannot name. Standing upon that endless white plain, surrounded by nothing but the sound of the wind, one begins to feel small, not defeated, but humbled. The ice doesn't care who we are or what we believe. It endures, patient and absolute, while humanity earns, builds, and forgets. To the Earth, our history is only a flicker. To Antarctica, it is barely a breath. And yet there is something deeply human in our fascination with this frozen world. It draws us not because of what it gives, but because of what it withholds. It reminds us that some truths are not meant to be owned, only understood. That silence itself can hold more meaning than 1,000 explanations. When the explorers of the past looked upon this land, they believed they had reached the end of the world. But maybe they were looking at its beginning. A place untouched by our noise, a reflection of what Earth once was before we named and divided it. Antarctica, in its stillness, is the purest expression of the planet's memory, and perhaps its warning. Because when we stare into that vast white mirror, we do not just see ice and sky. We see the outline of ourselves, our ambition, our fear, our beauty, our denial. It shows us the cost of our curiosity and the fragility of the world we build upon shifting ground. One day the ice will melt. The secrets it guards will surface. Fossils, ruins, data, and truths we are not ready to face. And when that happens, the question will no longer be what lies beneath, but whether we were ever worthy of knowing. For now, Antarctica remains silent, the last untouched mirror on Earth. And as we look into its frozen depths, perhaps the real discovery is not what we find there, but what we finally see within ourselves. In the end, Antarctica is more than ice, more than mystery. It's a mirror, one that shows us how much we've forgotten and how much we still dare to seek. Every question carved into its silence is a reminder that truth doesn't vanish. It just waits, buried in time, beneath layers we've yet to uncover. And perhaps that's what draws us to mysteries like this. Not the answers, but the endless chase through the cold, quiet, unknown. If this journey through the frozen secrets of our planet spoke to you, if it made you wonder what else might be hidden beneath our world, then help this mystery travel further, like the video. Share it with those who still believe the world has secrets left to tell. And subscribe, so together we can keep searching the forgotten corners of the Earth where silence still remembers everything. Because this is Mysteries of Earth.